Hey guys, what's up? TTHD back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about the primitive data types of Java. So before I begin, I'd like to say that this video is the first of a series of videos for Java, specifically for the AP Comp Sci Java class. But if you're also learning Java for the fun of learning Java, this video is totally applicable. You can continue watching. So what are the 8 primitive data types of Java? So the 8 primitive data types of Java are the int, double, boolean, long, float, byte, short, and char, which is short for character. Now, before I get into the specifics of these 8 primitive data types, I want to explore what a primitive data type is, right? So a primitive data type is a data type that is predefined by the Java language. So what this means is that whenever one of these variables are declared and initialized, there isn't an object created. And to really understand that, we should go take a look at memory. Here we are in memory. This is an abstract visualization of it. There's stack and there's also heap. These are two ways that memory stores information. And this is where we can clearly see the difference between a primitive data type and a reference data type. So when you say something along the lines of int x is equal to 100, which is a primitive data type, what happens is that memory goes and stores x equals 100 under stack. There is no object created in this instance. But when you declare and initialize something along the lines of string s equals hello, what happens is that a reference s is created under stack, which then refers to the object hello, which is under heap. So you can see the clear difference between the primitive type, which is the integer, versus the string, which is a reference variable. You can see that the object hello is created, while when you declare this int x equals 100, what happens is that x is just stored as 100. Now that you know the difference between a primitive and a reference data type, I want to get into the specifics of these 8 primitive data types. Now, before I start typing away, I want to talk about the way that we have to declare and initialize these primitive data types. So first off, you'd want to start with a data type, and then you'd want to follow it with a variable name, and then the equal sign, and then after which you'd want to have a value which is appropriate to the data type, followed by a semicolon. So this is going to be the way that you do this every single time. So as an example, let's start off with the Boolean. This, I think, is the simplest of the primitive data types. A Boolean can only hold 2 values, either true or false. Now, to declare and initialize this Boolean, we'd want to say Boolean in lowercase. Obviously, we're following that formula. And then you want to have a variable name. I'll call this tbool, equal, and then a value, which is going to be true, and then followed by the semicolon. So this is basically the way you'd want to declare and initialize a Boolean. If you want to do a false value, you'd want to say Boolean, obviously in lowercase again, fbool, I'll call this fbool for false Boolean, and then false, obviously followed by the semicolon. Now this is the way that you properly would declare and initialize a Boolean variable. Now that we're done with the Boolean, let's move on to the next one. So this next one is going to be the char, or the character data type, and a char data type can only hold a singular value. So what I mean by that is that it can hold any symbol on your keyboard, but only one of it. So it can hold only A, it can hold only F, it can hold only a question mark, or even just a exclamation mark, but it can't hold more than one thing. It can't ever say ASDF, that's going to be invalid, or it can't ever say a exclamation mark T, that's also going to be invalid. So I hope you get the point of this. It can only hold one character. That's all there really is for a character variable. Now that we're done with the Boolean and the char, let's move on to the integer-based primitive data types. So these are going to be the byte, the short, the int, and the long. So the thing with these is that they can only hold integer values, which means they can only hold whole numbers. And the difference between all 4 of these is the range that they can operate within. And what I mean by that is that, as you can see over here, the byte can only work within the range of -128 to +127. If you put any number that's bigger than 127 or any number that's less than 128, this byte will be invalid. So this g variable will not be valid anymore. If you want to use a value that's bigger or smaller than what a byte can hold, you'd want to use a short, which has a range of -32,000 all the way up to +32,000. And even if that does not work, you'd want to use the int, which is basically the most common one, which has a range of -2 billion all the way up to +2 billion. Now, if you're going to be holding a value that's even larger than the range of an int, you'd want to use a long. This range is in the quintillions. I'm not even going to write it out. But just remember, the byte is going to have the smallest range, the short is going to be second to that, the int is going to be third to that, and then the long is going to have the largest range when you're going to be taking in values of integers. But let's say you'd want to use a decimal value. You just don't want to use, integers all the time. For that, you can either use a float or you can use a double. Once again, the main difference between a float and a double is going to be the range of values that it can hold. A float can only hold a smaller range of decimal values, while the double can hold a really large range of decimal values. Once again, the double is also going to be the one that's going to be more commonly used, while a float is going to be less common. Another thing you'd want to note is that when you declare and initialize a float, you'd always want to say f at the end of every single decimal value that you put in there, so that Java knows that this is indeed a float, but not a double. Now, those were the 8 primitive data types of Java. I'm going to outline this again. The boolean is going to hold true or false values. The byte is going to hold integer values, obviously with the smallest range. The short is going to be second to that. The int is going to be holding values from -2 billion to around +2 billion. Once again, only integer values. And the long is going to have the biggest range in terms of holding integer values. If you'd want to use a character, a singular character, you'd want to use a char variable. If you want to work with decimal values, you can either use a float or a double. Obviously, the float is going to have a smaller range, and you'd also want to put that f at the end of each decimal value. But once again, the double is going to be the more common one, so you can easily use the double whenever you still want to use a decimal value. With that, this wraps up the video. I hope you guys liked it. If you guys did, feel free to hit that thumbs up button. If you have any questions, put that in the comment section below. And if you want more of this series, hit the subscribe button so that you'll be up to date whenever I upload these videos. With that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.